Okay, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Sheriff Wiggin. And if you haven't met him, Craig Wiggin, our Sheriff of Belknap County.
Thank you, Alan. Hopefully we're not going to have any audio or visual glitches that I need Skip to help me with. Before I forget and get into the presentation, since we're putting on sales pitches for fundraisers, I failed to show up at a meeting and I got elected the president of the New Hampshire Sheriff's Association, which represents all 10 sheriffs across the state. And we have a 501 entity for scholarships and charitable giving to organizations like Special Olympics, law enforcement, torch run, various benevolent funds. And we are actually organizing and are going to host a golf tournament, a charity golf tournament at Pheasant Ridge here in Guilford on August 26th, which is a Friday. And Alan, I'll send you I just got the press release today from Spectrum Marketing, which is going to work with us on this and do a lot of the fundraising. Spectrum, I know some of you folks work with them, and they do a lot of high-end presidential candidate work and national candidates, and they've agreed to assist us in organizing this and getting some sponsors. We've gotten some fairly decent commitments from some candidates, national level candidates, and who have said that they will come and help support us at this event. But it's going to be on Friday the 26th of August. And again, I'm going to send out a bunch of emails. I'll get them out to Alan and get them out to everyone that's in that email tree if we have any golfers here. And even if not, you can come by, and hopefully we're going to have a good turnout for that. And we're going to, I think we're charging $100 a person, so it's $400 a team. And that's going to include a continental breakfast and a chicken and rib Conagiani's dinner afterwards. So it's going to be limited to 144 golfers, which is quite a few, and we think that it's probably going to be a sellout. So again, if you're a golfer, we'll let you know. We expect that we're going to be able to get perhaps some national exposure given the timing of this event. And again, if we get some big name candidates that will come by, that will help us raise some funds for our scholarship and charitable funding. So that's my sales pitch. So on to the show. I want to thank Alan for inviting me. I know most of you in this room, and some of you have heard from me before. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this particular presentation. I've given it to a number of folks. I have given it to some members of various political bodies and select boards, Kiwanis clubs, schools, that sort of thing. And my reason for doing this, and when Alan invited me to come, I said, what do you want me to speak about? He said, you can talk about anything you want. I said, that's a little dangerous, don't you think? You know, I am a politician, even though that's not my favorite thing to do. So what I decided to do was to come and explain to you what this Special Operations Group is, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think that I can clarify up some misconceptions that some folks seem to have about what this entity is, why it exists, why we have it in the first place, who pays for it, who runs it, who does what, why do we need it, and answer any questions that you have. So shortly after being appointed sheriff in 2007, largely because of my background, I was asked to assume the command leadership role of this organization. And all the assets are controlled by the county anyway, and it makes the most sense. So I reluctantly agreed to do that, because that's not really one of the things that I signed on to do, but I did do that. And I'm going to explain to you what the purpose of this entity is, how it's organized, who's on it, who controls it, what the taxpayer burden is, if you will, on this, which is extremely minimal at this point. But the reason that this Special Operations Group exists is primarily that. It's to prevent loss of life. It's to respond to very life-threatening, dangerous situations. And none of you live under a rock. You're all contemporary people. You watch the news and you read the newspaper and you see some of the things that are going on every day, even here in Laconia. Last week we had an incident right around the corner from here where someone was stabbed and someone was shot. And unfortunately, incidents like this seem to be increasing even up here in sleepy little New Hampshire. To date, we've had nearly 40 police officers in the United States killed in the line of duty by gunfire, another 45 killed in other incidents involving either motor vehicle crashes, being struck by cars, falling off of buildings, those sorts of incidents in the line of duty. So this is starting out to be a very dangerous year. And we have to acknowledge that there are these dangerous situations, and we in law enforcement have to be prepared to deal with them, to protect all of you, protect our families, protect our homes, protect our kids and our businesses. So the primary reason for the existence of this team is to exactly do that, and that's to prevent loss of life. We provide assistance to local law enforcement agencies with what are called special threat situations. And I'll tell you what that is, because we don't send SWAT teams out on routine calls. It has to meet a certain level of magnitude before we're going to deploy 23 or 24 people and all those assets out there, because number one, it's very expensive, and number two, we're not going to overuse it. So I'll explain to you some of the reasons why we would use what's commonly known as a SWAT team. And to give you just a little bit of background, these teams were formed, these paramilitaristic teams, which some people are definitely afraid of, and we'll talk about that too. Hopefully dispel some myths, I think, that exist in some people's minds. But it goes back to Chief Daryl Gates in Los Angeles, who was the chief in the 1970s, when some of the extreme militant organizations like the Symbionese Liberation Army, the Weathermen Underground, and the Black Panthers were blowing up buildings, shooting and kidnapping public officials, and that sort of thing. And they were very well armed. And a couple of incidents occurred in Los Angeles. Everything seems to happen in California and move this way east, literally and figuratively. And it's no different in law enforcement. They kind of try new things that seem to take hold and they move east. And SWAT, or Special Weapons and Tactics, which is what Chief Gates chose to call that entity, was formed. They trained these people above and beyond the average police officer. They equipped them with sufficient weaponry so that they could meet the threat. Because we found, and we still find today, some people are much better armed than us. And we need to be prepared to deal with those folks, because they'll kill us. And if they'll kill us, they'll certainly not hesitate to kill you. So we have to be prepared to deal with it. You can acknowledge it, you can pretend it doesn't exist, and you can live under a rock, or you can recognize that these things are out there, and that law enforcement, you pay us to protect you from these people. And we're the sheepdogs in essence, and that's what we're trying to do, and we do our best. Do we make mistakes from time to time? Yep, we're human beings, but I think all in all we do a pretty good job. But these special threat situations, when they come up, are what we would deploy a special operations team for. And we provide advanced level tactical training to a lot of agencies upon any request. This handsome young lad that's with me here tonight, he's much younger than I, but he went bald prematurely, and we picked on him about that. This is Deputy Jim McIntyre, who's a resident of Guilford. Jim is a member of the team. Prior to coming to work for the Sheriff's Office, Jim's been a Laconia police officer, and he was a Northfield police officer, and he served with the Central New Hampshire Special Operations Team, and he's on our team as well. Prior to even being deployed and even be allowed to go out and respond to a call or even get into the call list, Jim had to attend 80 hours of training on special weapons and tactics, basic deployment procedures. And it's very demanding, and he will tell you it's physically and mentally demanding. To get on one of these teams, you have to, A, do it for the right reasons. We screen these people very carefully. And Jim's a veteran. He's been around for a long time. I mean, how many years have you been how many years of law enforcement do you have, Jim? 15?
Yeah, 12.
And first of all, we don't take people who are brand new. They have to be seasoned police officers, have some street experience and some maturity. Second of all, they have to have good people skills and good team skills. They have to be able to play well with others, so to speak. They also have to come into it with the right attitude, and that is that they're not there to get into shootouts. They're not there to go kick in people's doors. They're there because they want to learn, they want to train, they want to be better. A lot of the folks, like Jim, have former military experience. So they already have a firearms background and a tactical background. Some of them have advanced level skills that some folks don't have. And so for us to grab people like that, it's an advantage because they already have a high degree of training acumen. So when they take this on, they know what they're getting themselves into. Many of them have experienced combat, so it's nothing new to them to get into a firefight if, God forbid, that should happen. And we've had situations where we've been shot at. I don't like being shot at. I'm too old for this at my age, but we have to be prepared to deal with those things. And these guys are very highly trained to deal with it. So before anybody even gets on one of these teams, they have to be screened. And I'll tell you how our team is organized because it's a multi-jurisdictional team. We have several people, including me, assigned to the team. And the area police departments all contribute personnel. Some of the larger PDs, like Laconia, for example, contribute a couple more. The smaller PDs, like towns like Barnstead or Samerton, contribute one because it's a burden on them to send somebody to training every 2 weeks and to send them out on a call out if the team gets activated. So that's a little background on what happens before they even get on the team. The last thing that we do is, in the spirit of cooperation, and this has improved a great deal, one of the good things that has happened since 9/11 is we all play well in the public safety industry, much better than we used to. The cops and the firemen actually talk to each other. We actually can get on the radio and speak with each other. We have interoperable communications. And there's now much more of a focus on all hazards training, and not just the police do this, the firemen do this, and the twain shall never meet. Those days are over. We actually train together. We're going to do a training exercise this Saturday, as a matter of fact. Then it's going to involve the state police, our team, Laconia PD, Laconia Fire, the Lakes Region CERT team, and then we're going to do a live exercise in May at the Laconia Middle School, so that we can all train together, test our communications capability, and make sure that if we do get a large-scale event, like a, God forbid, a school shooting, that we can respond to that accordingly, coordinate our resources, have incident command, unified incident command, and that we can prepare for these things. My philosophy has always been prepare for the worst, hope for the best. When you're not prepared, it's going to be the worst. So we have to plan. Otherwise, things don't go very well. So how was this team founded? Dan Collis, when he was the sheriff, obtained, I'll talk about some of your favorite subjects, a Homeland Security grant. It wasn't apparently such a pariah in 2003. Now again, I wasn't here. This was done before I got here. But he obtained Homeland Security funding to put in a multi-jurisdictional team that would cover all of Belknap County. It was a fairly substantial amount of money. It was about close to $500,000. That allowed them to get everybody trained, to establish this team. The team was not activated for nearly 18 months. They didn't just form up a bunch of guys and say, okay, now we have a SWAT team, we're going to go out and start responding to calls. They did not do that. They waited until they had plenty of training and resources behind them, the proper equipment and the proper expertise, before they did any deployment of any actual resources at all, which was a smart way to go about doing it. So the first day they trained was in 2003, just a little over 8 years ago. They discussed how the organization was going to be placed. Everyone got to work together. They had classroom instruction, and they started using the Superior Court for training as movement as a team inside the building. In 2004, they did a 2-week program, which was sponsored by the National Tactical Officers Association. The NTOA is pretty much the standard bearer for these types of teams. They really set the bar, and everything that we do in compliance with NTOA guidelines as far as the minimum of hours of training, which, by the way, is 496 hours a year. That's ongoing in-service training. That's a lot. But because of the seriousness and sometimes the challenges of what these guys get involved in, they need to maintain that level of training. These are perishable skills. I know we have some people in here that engage in firearms training. You go to the range and you shoot, right? Well, Elaine scares me because I know she always tells me she's carrying a gun. So, but if you have a firearm and you don't train with it, you don't become proficient with it, and you're going to forget what you learned with respect to your grip and trigger pull and sight alignment. And if you don't practice, you're going to lose those skills. So, and that's not under stress. If any of you, and I know we've got a couple military veterans, if you've been in a firefight, you've been under stress, your perishable skills will diminish very, very quickly under stress. Paper targets don't shoot back. With someone shooting back at you, you get tunnel vision, your adrenaline gets high, and you'll lose fine motor skills. And if you don't train to compensate for that and you learn how to deal with that, you're going to get yourself or somebody else hurt. So they train and train and train and train and train so that they can respond much more efficiently under stress or when things really, really go bad. So how is this team organized? First of all, they have to volunteer. All the members have to volunteer for participation. They don't get any extra pay for this. They put in a lot of their time. Many of our team members have deals worked out with their chiefs where they come to training on their day off. They don't get paid for their training. They only get paid if they get called out, which is not all that often. They volunteer their time. They'll change their schedules to come to the training every other week. But in order to get on, again, as I mentioned, it's a rigorous selection process. They have to be recommended by their chief. They have to pass a very rigorous physical agility test and a firearms qualification. So they have to have already good firearms qualification skills when they come in the door. A psychological examination. The last thing that we want to do is sit down with some young man or young lady and say, why do you want to do this? Well, I want to kill bad guys. That person's not going to get on the team. And I probably don't need to get into the reasons with you as to why that would be. You want someone with mature mindset, that they're doing it for the right reasons. They want the training, they want to improve their skills, they want to become a better police officer, they want to help teach other police officers and help protect their community. Because even if 5 years later they move on, get promoted, and they go off the team, they still have that training and their experience, and it makes them a better police officer. When they respond to these very stressful, difficult situations like a shooting, they're better prepared to respond to it, and they do a much better job. They also sit down with an oral interview, which I always participate in, as does the team leader, and usually one or two of the other senior team leaders. And we put them through a whole bunch of scenario-based situations. What would you do if? Tell us what you think about this. And we rate them on that. And if we don't all agree that the candidate is suitable, they don't move up to the next level. All the police departments participate, as I said, in Belknap County. So it's a multi-jurisdictional team. It's not my team. I simply coordinate the team, and I'm responsible for command of the team when it's activated or when they report for a team assignment. So if they're a sergeant or a lieutenant in their department and they come, they're just a team member, unless they happen to be a team leader. Rank means nothing. Everyone is equal when they show up. And they are very much a team. They get to know each other very, very well. They work very closely together, and they depend upon each other for their safety. They have to work extremely close together. If they don't trust each other implicitly, it's not going to work. So if you're only as good as your weakest link, right? And so if we have somebody that's a really weak link, we're not going to keep them on the team. We'll remove them from the team. And that's why the more rigorous the selection process is, the less likely that is going to happen. So this is an organizational chart of the structure of the team, with the operations commander, which is me, the team leader. Somebody didn't do spell cheat, did they? We have several sections, which includes long rifle, marksmen, point, which are kind of they're tactical observers, if you will. CNT stands for Crisis Negotiation Team. Those are hostage negotiators. We have 3 folks on the team. They are trained and experienced in dealing with people who are irrational, under the influence of drugs and or alcohol, perhaps holding hostages, perhaps have psychological issues. They're very adept at developing rapport with these folks, communicating with these folks. Our first mission on any call that involves someone, for example, who's barricaded, is get them talking. You've watched enough movies, and I'm not revealing any secrets here. Unless there's active shooting taking place, we're going to try to resolve this peacefully. We want to try to talk to people, talk situations down, and we've been very successful at that. And I will knock on wood. We've had some hairy situations, and that goes with the territory, but we always try to negotiate things down, calm things down, place an overwhelming presence there so the individual realizes that they have to deal with us, we're not going to go away, and they have to talk to us. And I'll give you a couple examples and some cases. I have some photographs. Nothing graphic, and there's nothing here that I have a problem with Skip putting out. It's all public knowledge, and I think more folks know it, the better. We use tactical dispatchers. If we have a large-scale event, the dispatcher is there to help me in the command post, to call emergency services, coordinate with whoever the incident commander is. Hey, we need to block this road off. We need to notify these folks over here what's going on so they don't look out the window and freak out. What else do we need for support? Do we need the fire department to stage here? Do we need an extra ambulance? Do we need a wrecker? What do we need? So the dispatcher is essentially on the phone and on the radio making lots of those calls for us. We utilize scouts. A fourth man is kind of a tactical coordinator who works in the command post with me, and he's kind of like the sergeant major. He's moving people around, keeping track of who is where, what assets are on standby. Do we have 2 people behind this house or this building? Is it a multi-story building, and who's on what floor? All that sort of stuff. There's a lot of dynamic things happening, and you have to keep track of it. And we also don't want to lose any of our people. If they go out of radio contact, we need to know where everybody is. Operators, those are the folks on the ground. Those are the guys that are doing the hard work, that are holding perimeters or entering. We have people that are trained as breachers. They're trained either dynamic breaching to get us into places where people don't want us to get, if we absolutely have to do that. We also have tactical medics. We are extremely fortunate. In fact, we're the only team in New Hampshire that has 2 physicians assigned to the team. One of them is a sworn deputy sheriff. It's Dr. Andy Bobuff, that some of you may know, who works up at LRGH. I know, Bob, you know him. Andy is a terrific guy. He decided that he wanted to do this. He volunteers his time. He went through the part-time officers academy, which is 300 hours now, I think, 12 weeks. Got appointed as a special deputy sheriff. He maintains his police certifications, and he does everything that the full-time guys do, and he's an emergency room physician. He's also a rappelling instructor. I don't jump off of perfectly good buildings. He's trying to teach me how to do that, and I just don't want to do that anymore. He loves to do that. Jim likes to do that too. And the other physician on our team is Dr. Dave Mattice from Guilford. Yes, and Dave volunteers his time. He shows up. David has a great deal of emergency tactical medical background. He serves on the Metropolitan Medical Response Corps. He's one of the national coordinators for that. He's a very highly trained individual, and he comes to the calls with us whenever he's available. He comes to training, goes through all the training that everybody else does, and supports us with any medical needs that we have if somebody gets hurt. One of our special deputies is also a full-time firefighter. That's Captain Mike Balcom from Guilford, who's a sworn special deputy sheriff, and he's a paramedic. So at any given call, we have anywhere between 1 and 3 advanced medical professionals on site. So if there is an issue where somebody gets hurt, we used them just a few weeks ago at a call in Alton where the individual hyperventilated, had an extremely high blood alcohol level, well in excess of 0.30, and he needed medical attention, and the doctor was able to administer that medical attention and coordinate that with the folks at the hospital. They were at a call a few years ago, and one of the witnesses involved in the case began hyperventilating and had a massive heart attack. And with the defibrillator and CPR, they revived him on the scene and saved his life. So having them on site with us is absolutely invaluable. So we're very fortunate and happy to have them. So what can this team do? We can contain a situation. If we have somebody that's got a gun, that's in a building that's threatening to harm people, we can contain that, establish a perimeter. We frequently get asked to do high-risk arrest warrants and search warrants for people who are convicted felons that have guns, have a history of violence, have a history of assaulting other people or police officers. If the situation warrants it, we will actually engage the team to make sure that that situation doesn't get out of hand so that someone doesn't come out and start shooting at the police or at the neighborhood. Other high-threat situations, like people who are barricaded, we get a lot of those calls, and obviously hostage situations where someone is holding someone against their will. The team is also trained on compound raids. As you all know, we have the Hells Angels compound here in the city of Laconia. I won't get into any more detail than that. But we have to be aware that we're dealing with some people who will arm themselves up way above and beyond belief, will barricade themselves, will fortify their homes, and we have to be prepared to deal with those kinds of individuals if things get out of hand. They can also do covert reconnaissance and surveillance. A lot of the calls that we deal with involve people in motor vehicles who are driving around, perhaps they're armed, threatening to commit suicide, perhaps there was a road rage incident, they shot at somebody, and we locate the vehicle and this individual refuses to get out of the vehicle, but we know they're in the vehicle with a gun. Tracking, clearing threat areas, and VIP protection is also something else that they train on. We do get asked occasionally to assist the Secret Service. Members of the team have received lots of advanced training on things like terrorist operations, crisis negotiations, as I said, explosive entry and tactics, chemical agents. We do use chemical agents if it's appropriate, and less lethal applications. Contrary to sometimes popular belief, we really don't want to shoot people. It's a lot of paperwork, and it's a psychologically, it ruins everybody's day. And I mean, the last thing that any police officer wants to do is take a life. You really don't want to, but it goes with the territory. You have to be prepared to do that. We try to take every effort not to do that, and we do use less lethal applications when it's practical. Things like pepper ball and beanbag. So, for example, if we have a guy with a knife on a porch, we're going to attempt a less lethal application if we can. If he comes charging at the police officers with a knife, all bets are off. But we try to resolve things as with the least amount of force as necessary. We have non-lethal, obviously, tools like tasers. We could talk all night about tasers and show you entertaining videos, but most of them you see on YouTube anyway. Long rifle and observer capabilities. Again, we talked about reconnaissance and surveillance. Everybody on the team is a firearms expert. Both handguns, carbines, tactical rifles, submachine guns, shotguns, and several of them, like Jim, are trained with long rifles like .308 rifles, scope rifles. They're trained with intelligence gathering, that is to try to find out what's going on. Because when I show up at the scene, I need to know what's going on. How many people are there? Where are they? What is the layout of this house? Are they holding hostages? If we show up at the scene for a barricade call, and it's one guy in there refusing to come out, but he's threatening to kill everybody, we're certainly going to handle that situation much differently than he's got a hostage and he's threatening to kill his hostage this minute if you don't leave. We've had those calls too. So I certainly need to know if the second is happening as opposed to the first. Time is not on our side on the second one. We talked about the tactical medical services. Those are on the scene all the time. The small arms specialization. They train in close quarter combat. A couple of our guys are mixed martial arts fighters. One's an instructor, and they like to try and beat us up whenever they possibly can. They find that fun. Mechanical breaching, which is to get through a door or a window if we need to. The team leaders and myself have received lots and lots of training on critical incident command management and risk management. I'm nationally certified in critical incident risk management. Booby trap recognition. IEDs are becoming much more of a problem. We see far more pipe bombs and improvised explosive devices now, thanks to the internet. Less lethal, as I said, chemical, specialty impact munitions, all of these. I'm going to go through that list again. We maintain our certifications so that if there is some sort of an incident and we have to produce all of our training records, if we're sued, we can show that we were trained and we were trained to national standards. And the courses that we attend, if something occurs and I get sued as the sheriff or the sheriff's department or the county gets sued, the folks that train me will bring multiple experts to testify on our behalf, as long as we've complied with the training that we were given. Just a couple interesting photos. People like to see this stuff. What do you mean by an explosive entry? You know, we don't pull houses off the foundation. We use them in a very limited capacity. For example, we'll use shake charges if we needed, for example, to get through a door that was barricaded or blocked. This is a photograph, it's from a training session, where the explosive breacher put a shake charge on there, and then they'll remove the material. It will basically remove the material underneath the charge, and it won't damage anything around it. So, again, we just want to be able to get through that door if we needed to make entry because someone's life was in danger. So once the shake charge is detonated, you can see it cleanly leaves a nice hole, in this particular case through the door, so that the team could make entry. What do we mean by chemical munitions and less lethal munitions? A couple photographs that I'm going to show you are a situation where we would deploy chemical munitions like CS gas or CN gas or OC gas. It's kind of like the pepper spray, but it's pepper spray on steroids. It's in a 40 millimeter launcher. For you guys that were in the military, you probably are familiar with either 37 or 40 millimeter launchers. That's what we use. Depending on the situation and the environment, it's going to depend on what type of munition we deploy. The photo that I'm going to show you involves a case that happened a few years ago where a young man was driving around this area. He was involved in a domestic dispute with his live-in girlfriend. He went to a location here in Laconia where he thought she was, threatened several people with a gun, a handgun, got in his car, went to her mother's home looking for her. She was not there. Made threats that he was going to take her life and take his own life. And it appeared that he was serious because he showed several people the gun that he was waving around. Ultimately, he was stopped by some officers up here on the bypass, Laconia, Guilford officers, and a state police officer. And he refused to get out of the car. And he was sitting there waving the gun around, indicating that he was going to kill himself or any police officer that approached him. So they activated the team. The team responded up there with the armored rescue vehicle, which I'll show you some photos of in a minute. Some of you may have seen that. You may say, what do you need an armored vehicle for? Well, in this particular case, we were able to drive right up on this car, which is ballistically protected, and they deployed a chemical, 40-millimeter chemical round, a CS round, powder, after trying to negotiate with this young man for quite some time, and he just wasn't coming out. So we decided it was time to make his environment uncomfortable and get him to come out. So what they did was launch the 40-millimeter projectile through the side window right behind him. You can see where it entered the side window, blew out the window nice and clean, into his back seat, and you can see the white powder, the residue of the CS powder. Now when that goes off inside the car, it's going to immediately envelop the inside of the car with this white, nasty CS gas. If you've ever been exposed to CS gas, Frank, you probably did in the military, you're shaking your head. Very nasty stuff. It causes you to cough uncontrollably, you have difficulty breathing, you spasm, your eyes water. It's just not a pleasant experience. And as soon as that went off, he exited the vehicle and laid down in the middle of the road. And he left the loaded Glock 40 caliber right next to him between the seat. So that was a situation that was resolved peacefully, thankfully, and again, thankfully he was alone. And that's the use of chemical munitions very effectively and very safely where nobody got hurt. And you get the individual out, you flush them with cool water and expose them to air, and within a matter of a few minutes, they're fine. But we let that's what we have the tactical medical folks for. We let them deal with that sort of nastiness. Couple photos of the long rifle guys doing some training. They do qualify out to 500 yards usually. They play around at 1,000 yards, but they have to qualify out to 500 yards. So some training of their work. Some of you folks have seen this vehicle. This vehicle is owned by Belknap County. It's our mobile tactical command vehicle. It's an all-hazards type vehicle. We don't use it just for SWAT. We can use it for any incident command situation. You'll see some photos of the inside of it in a minute. We take this with us because it has radio, cell phone capability, it has a throw phone in there, it has other equipment in there that we may need, as lighting, that sort of thing, portable bullhorns. We keep water and snacks and stuff on supply in the vehicle for the guys if they're on a long call, because it's not unusual for them to be out there for 8 or 10 or 12 hours. And you got to feed them and keep them hydrated. This vehicle was purchased with Homeland Security money. And again, it's registered to the Belknap County Sheriff's Department. This is the inside of the vehicle. You can see it's not glamorous. It's aluminum, and it's designed as a working vehicle. Whiteboards, mapping. There's a table so that we can do some work in there. Those are benches down each side. We use the whiteboard, the fourth man and/or I and/or the tactical dispatcher. We can diagram out plans if we need to. We can diagram out who is where the team is as they move around. We keep a list of who is on the scene, if anybody leaves the scene, if we get new people on the scene, who the local police department are, phone numbers, suspect information, victim information, all that stuff so we can keep track of it. Bank of radios and chargers, extra radio, batteries, because again, those guys are sometimes out there for hour after hour after hour, so we can recharge batteries and keep them going so they can stay in communications. This is the back of the truck, and if any of you ever wanted to see it, all you got to do is come up and I'll take you around back and let you walk around in it. You're more than welcome to. You can see the phone systems that are here. These connect with the cab up front, where the negotiators usually sit, so that they can be not bothered by me or anybody else that's in their way. Extra radio bank in the back so that we can talk to anybody. We have an onboard computer and laptop so we can print out documents if we need to, search warrants, arrest warrants, that sort of thing if we needed to on scene. This is the tactical dispatch area, again with another whiteboard and another radio, hands-free cell phone so that we can communicate securely if we need to. Paperwork, all the sort of paperwork and supplies are in there. And that's the front of the cab. And in this particular case, they have what's called the throw phone base set up. We can run a hard wire with a throw phone out if there's either no phone or somebody's cell phone has gone dead or they don't want to talk to us. We can actually establish communications using that ruggedized throw phone, and the negotiator can speak with the individual or the individuals inside if they're inside quite effectively. So they usually do that. This is the phone that they use. I can pick that up and listen to the calls if I need to in the back if they're actually negotiating with somebody, so I can hear what's going on. A lot of everything that we do now, everybody in the world's got a cell phone. So inevitably we end up talking to the guy on a cell phone, but 90% of the time. This is our armored rescue vehicle, ARV for short. It's made by a company down in Pittsfield, Mass. called Lenco. Lenco makes these for law enforcement and military purposes. Essentially what it is it's an F-350. Lenco buys the F-350 chassis, takes it apart, and modifies it with the steel frame custom-built components. It's an all-wheel drive vehicle. It's powered with a Cummins diesel turbo engine. It's a lot of fun to drive. It has the capability of taking, unless they're my size, about 8 fully equipped team guys in the back, which you'll see in a second. It is steel. Those are run flat tires. It's a military spec vehicle. That allows us to get into a hot zone where somebody may be shooting to extract somebody who's been hurt. It also allows us, as I explained to you a few minutes ago with the case with the car, to get right up on a situation and still be ballistically protected. We have been shot at in this. Lenco says, I don't want to test it, says that it will take up to a 50 caliber round, including the window glass. So the window glass is about that thick. That again was a Homeland Security purchased vehicle. Initially, Sheriff Collis got a hold of a donated armored car for next to nothing, and they retrofitted that. Shortly after that, they obtained the funding for this vehicle, which they picked up at Lenco down in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, is where Lenco is located. That's the front of the vehicle. Not too many people really want to see that coming up their driveway, I don't think. It does have a turret on the top, which allows us to pull up and still have the turret is up above. I don't think any of these have a photo of the turret. It allows us to pull up and again deploy gas or have an observer be able to see what's going on in a situation where maybe shots are being fired and still have some ballistic protection. If we have a little bit more time, I'd show you some videos. Just a couple of weeks ago, a team out near Cleveland, Ohio had a situation where they had a civilian and a police officer wounded in front of a house, and they had an individual in the house moving from window to window, shooting out at everybody in the street that would move. And they had those 2 injured people who were hiding behind cover trees in the front yard of this suspect's house, and they couldn't get to him until the Bearcat arrived. And once the Bearcat arrived, they were able to drive up, put the Bearcat between the wounded people and the suspects, put the wounded people in the back of the ARV and get them out of there into medical attention safely. So that's why it's called an armored rescue vehicle. That's primarily what it's there for, is to allow us to get at people that are perhaps being pinned down by gunfire, and we can't get at them. So what kind of things do we respond to? What's a critical incident? Again, a hostage situation. It's working. There we go. Barricaded subjects, those are the most of our calls, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. Sniper situations where someone is shooting randomly at people. Active shooter situations. Armed suicidal subjects. I have to tell you that is the majority of our calls. People who are suicidal, they've threatened to commit suicide, they're armed, they either fire off a couple of rounds to let people know that they're serious. Many of them we have found, and nationally this is a trend, you've probably all heard the term suicide by cops. They want us to do it for them, and they will attempt to engage in some sort of a lethal confrontation with the police so that the police will respond and do what they don't seem to have the ability to do. Tough situation. So what's a high-risk incident? We talked about the high-risk warrants, whether it's a search warrant or an arrest warrant for perhaps a convicted felon or a wanted person who has a history or propensity for violence or has made threats of violence. Searching and clearing operations, so for example, if a shooter was seen running into a building or a school, the team can deploy and make sure that that person is no longer a threat. We do respond and assist other special operations teams. For example, if one of the neighboring teams was on a call all night long and they were still negotiating with a suspect and they needed to relieve their people, we would respond under RSA 106, which gives us statewide authority for emergency operations like this, to assist each other. We've responded several times to assist the state police and relieve them on long calls, and they've also requested our ARV on several occasions, and we respond with that. And that is a condition of the Homeland Security grant as well, that it's made available statewide if necessary. I mean, we don't have to drive down to Nashua, they have their own team, but in this region, we will respond to assist other teams. And we've done that on several occasions. So, if a situation is going on and the local police chief shows up and says, I've got this guy pulled up and he's threatening to kill everybody, and he says, if you come near my house, I'm going to shoot you. It happens quite often, I hate to tell you. What are they going to do? They're going to arrive, they're going to try to contain this individual, make sure that they keep an eye on him so that he doesn't come out, get in a car, start running around the neighborhood. They're going to establish a perimeter, try to surround and hold this person in place. So they'll call the Sheriff's Department Communication Center. They'll tell us what's going on. The dispatchers, our dispatchers get these calls all the time. They're instructed, get as much as you possibly can. They'll find out who's on scene, who's the incident commander, is there a police chief there, is there a ranking officer or a supervisor there, because I usually want to be on the phone with that person to make sure that I'm getting the correct information as we have everybody en route. Communication Center will then contact either me and or usually simultaneously the team leader, and we will get as many facts as we can, and we will make a determination as to whether or not we're going to activate the team. And again, it has to meet a certain threat matrix. Many times we will tell them, try to make contact with this individual. Every once in a while, you know, they just don't want to do anything wrong, so they tend to be a little overcautious. Say, have you called them? No. Try calling them. Tell them to come out and surrender, that the building is surrounded. 10% of the time or so, that works. And they can resolve the situation without us even coming. So once we get there, we will meet with whoever's in charge, get a briefing, find out what's going on. We'll talk about suggestions and recommendations. Who is this we're dealing with? How many people? Does he or she have a history? Is it a psychological issue? Are they under the influence of drugs? Are they intoxicated? Is it all of the above? We're finding often it's all of the above. They have a mental health issue. They have an underlying drug problem and an alcohol problem. And that's a very volatile mixture when you're talking about somebody with a gun in their hands. We will assign and deploy the team members. Usually when we arrive, the local police officers have again established that initial perimeter. We'll get the team guys out there to take over, and they'll start putting eyes on the situation and relay back to us what they see, if anything, what they hear, if anything, and we'll make some decisions. We establish an emergency action plan. Like, for example, what are we going to do if this guy comes out and starts shooting? What are we going to do if he comes out and jumps in his car and tries to leave? Those sorts of things we have to start thinking about. We don't want to be caught by surprise. So we talk about those things as quickly as we can. When we have it contained, we will meet and brief the command element, whoever that happens to be. We'll work together on an emergency action plan. We'll begin formulating that. How are we going to resolve this situation? Always trying to engage in negotiations, trying to get that person on the phone. Sometimes they will not pick up the phone. And this is where the armored vehicle comes into play. We just did this a few weeks ago over in Alton. We had an individual that would not answer the phone. So they pulled the ARV right up in front of his house, right out his front door, got on the bullhorn, announced very loudly who they were, tried to get him to come to the window or at the door and surrender. Ultimately, he wouldn't do that, but we always try to engage in negotiations. And at a certain point in time, we have to decide whether we're going to make an entry or not. Are we going to deploy gas? How long are we going to try to make contact with this individual? How are we going to resolve this situation peacefully? So once we determine what the action plan is going to be, we'll discuss it with, they'll discuss it with me, obviously, and whoever the officer in charge is at the scene from the local agency that's requesting it. This is a summary of what the team has done in the last 5 years. And as you can see, leading the list are armed and barricaded subjects. The vast majority of the calls that we get are, we've got Joe Below here, we've dealt with him many times. He's got guns, he's intoxicated. He called his mother and told her goodbye. He says he's not going to live beyond tonight, and if the police show up, he'll do what he has to do. Those sorts of things. Or somebody else will make a report that this individual has threatened to harm themselves. Once the police get a call like that, they have to act on it. You know, you can't just say, well, we got to wait until he hurts somebody. You all know what's going to happen if we do that. And this person, God forbid, hurts himself, or worse, hurts someone else. It's easy enough for us to get sued when we do things right. So the police agencies are basically now in a no-win situation, particularly when it's someone who's threatening to commit suicide. And that, again, is the vast majority of our calls. This is where our crisis negotiators come in to play, and they are invaluable. Just a few years ago, and not to pick on Alton, but I will because it's one that comes to mind. We had a woman who was going through a custody dispute with her ex, and there were underlying substance abuse issues. She was intoxicated, and she was threatening to kill herself. And the crisis negotiator was able to get cell phone contact with her, and it took about 3 hours, but ultimately he was able to convince this woman to put the gun down and get out of the car, and she surrendered peacefully. We've had several situations where the crisis negotiator has been able to talk people out peacefully without anybody getting hurt, no shots being fired, nobody having to take any adverse action. So again, our primary focus is always on using the crisis negotiators until that no longer proves to be fruitful. Then we do what we'll need to do. The high-risk warrants are the next most active category. In the last 5 years, we've done 16 of those. Searches for armed or wanted suspects, for example, someone that just robbed a store that was seen in this neighborhood, will go and assist the local police in saturating a neighborhood and look for this individual. They've done 3 protection details, crowd controls. Explosive devices, we had one of those where a guy had what turned out to be simulated explosive devices, but the ATF certainly thought they were real. Reconnaissance and surveillance, some building clearing operations. The motor vehicle assault was the one that you saw that I showed you the photographs of. So, as you can see, the team's been out quite a bit. It's almost 50 activations. So, average about 10 a year. I just throw this picture in. This is a little guy who was sitting behind the wheel of the ARV at the Public Safety Day up at Meadowbrook. And, he wanted to drive it. And I was going to let him, but his mother said no. That's a photo that was taken in 2006 with the Seacoast team and the Central Operations team during the Hells Angels World Run. So that's an overview of what the team does and why it exists. Again, the assets are all owned by the county. Now, they're controlled by the county. All the federal grant reporting was done by the county. I have a line item in my budget, for those of you that have seen my budget, for the Special Operations team. And that's what that line item is for. It's to maintain the vehicles, to replace equipment that we need to that breaks. Radios break sometimes, and this is a rough business. They'll drop a radio or they'll fall, and we have to get it repaired. A headset will break, a wire will break, we got to get it fixed. So that's what that line item in my budget is for. And again, every piece of equipment that's assigned to those folks is actually owned by the taxpayers. All of us own that equipment. So again, one of the misnomers that's out there is that this is some sort of a private entity. It's not even in the slightest. It's a multi-jurisdictional team. There are hundreds of these across the United States, and it's very efficient because everybody contributes a little bit for the benefit of everybody else. And any town in the county, all they have to do is pick up the phone if they need our services, and we respond and assist those police departments. And if you speak with your local police chiefs and ask them whether you think this is a valuable asset for them to have, if one of them says no, please let me know who that is. Because it will be a surprise to me. And we'll send him a bill next time we go to his town. But they're all highly supportive, very supportive of this. And the fact that I do all the work makes it even better for them. But I don't mind doing it really as a labor of love. It's very important. It's a very dangerous business. I mean, we recognize that, but we take this responsibility very seriously. All these guys take this responsibility very seriously. When they pick up their hand and swear that oath to the Constitution like all you folks did, with that oath went the authority to take someone's life. And that's not anything that any of us take lightly. And after 32 years in this business, I still think about that almost every day. That, you know, every police officer that's worth his or her salt goes out there and has to be prepared to say, okay, is this the day? Am I ready? I hope not, but I hope I'm ready if I have to. Because there are people out there shooting at us, you know, and you shoot at me, I'm going to shoot back. I'm just going to tell you that. But that's the reason for the team. Again, it's only in extreme situations. Those are the situations where the police departments, especially around here that are smaller agencies, where they need the help to resolve. Some guy's barricaded in a house, refuses to come out, he's got a gun. That's where the training and the equipment, having that armored vehicle there to be able to safely get people in and out, get right up and resolve a situation like that, establish incident command, unified command, that works very well. And it's really been a successful model. And that's what, when you folks vote for that line item in my budget, which got a little whack taken out of it, but that's okay. We'll do the best that we can. We're at a point now where a lot of our tactical vests, which are very expensive, they're military grade vests, about $2,000 a piece, need to be replaced. And I recognize the economic times that are here, but I want to make sure these guys have good equipment. We're trying to work on some private fundraising to change out at least the older vests and cycle out 2 or 3 of them at a time, because that's a lot of money. You do the math. 23 guys times $2,000. And but that's a critical piece of equipment for reasons I don't need to bore you with. You all know why that vest is a critical piece of equipment. And these are the heavy, really heavy-duty tactical vests that they need to protect themselves from some of the stuff that they get potentially get fired at them. So that's going on. But you know, we have that line item to maintain the vehicles. If something breaks, as I said, replace a piece of equipment, maintain some of the instructor certifications that we have, because we're now able to train police officers in state here for stuff that sometimes you'd have to go to Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut for. We offer that training here. For example, we offer a rapid deployment class for first responder police officers. If you get a call today that there's a man with a gun at your elementary school, what are you going to do? We put a training program on about that. Now, we all cringe to think about that possibility. Don't think it can't happen here. I have kids in school. God forbid that it does, but I think that you want us to be prepared to deal with that, do you not? Yeah. And that's what we train our folks to deal with. We want to make sure that they know what to expect, that they know what they're doing when they get there, and that they can keep kids safe. So we hope to God that it never happens, but we have to be prepared for it if it does. We have people doing armed robberies every day. Again, we just had a shooting here in Laconia the other night. There are bad people out there with guns, and we're the ones that have to go find them for you. And we need to be prepared to deal with that. And so that's one reason why this training is so important. So that's my spiel about the Special Ops team. If any of you have any questions, I know we've been at it for quite a while. I don't want to go any longer. Representative Kingsbury. Yes, sir.
Hi, Sheriff. It's great to hear this. As you know, I'm of the ones that think that all lawful police work is local, and you're local. But the question I have, counties and other parts of the United States, the county sheriff has what's called a posse power. I don't think that happens in New England counties.
Well, are you talking about the authority to swear people in as deputy sheriffs?
No.
Or are you talking about the posse comitatus where I can round up citizens and deploy you as deputies like John Wayne used to do? Is that what you mean? Here's the problem with that here, Bob, in New Hampshire. RSA 104-28. If you read RSA 104, it covers the duties and responsibilities of the office of the sheriff, which, as you know, is a constitutional office. 104-28 says, I am personally liable for the actions of my deputies. So, before I appoint someone a deputy sheriff, I want to make sure that they know what they're doing. And the statutes now are such that the days of just putting on a badge and a gun and going out there and saying, go help me catch the bad guys are long over. The society is too litigious. And so the short answer to your question is no, because of the liability, the vicarious and direct liability for appointing someone, any law enforcement authority. I can appoint, the statute says I can appoint as many deputy sheriffs as I need. The problem is getting them certified with any law enforcement authority. In order to have actual law enforcement authority, you have to be a certified full-time or part-time police officer, which has very stringent minimum standards. So that's why we're a little bit different than some of the old West states that still have that
I
active
have
law.
the experience. I was called out by the posse power in Maryland to fight a forest fire.
I think we're going to get you right up there and swear you in, Bob, and we're going to put you to work. I'm sorry.
Did you have anything to do with the recent thing a week or two ago with Newport?
No.
And they had that, you were called out?
No.
You don't get called out of the county?
We get, once in a while we get called out of the county, but no, we did not get called out for that.
Barbara, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering what your line item was that you were referring to in your budget. What was the dollar amount on that?
Well, it was 15,000, it's now I think 10. I think when the last cuts were made, we took,
5,000 out.
yeah, I took 5,000 out of there, and we're just gonna do the best we can. I mean, the vehicles now, my concern, the vehicles now are out of warranty, so if we have like the turbocharger and the ARB goes, that's about a $3,000 part right there. So, you know, again, I'm cognizant of as cognizant as anybody. I'm pretty tight-fisted with money. For those of you that have seen my budgets over the last 4 years that I've been the sheriff, they haven't gone up more than 1%. So I try to do the best I can with what we have and not ask for any more out of the taxpayers. Bob?
When you're called out by a town and you get to the scene of an incident, are you in command at that point, and is the local police know that they have to back off and listen to you?
Yes. Part of the memorandum of agreement that we have with each chief is that if they ask for us, once I get there, they relinquish tactical command to me. That doesn't mean that we don't work together, and they still have responsibility. Like, for example, I don't have time to worry about the fact that we've got the road shut down a half a mile down the road. So I leave it to the on-scene incident commander, which may be the chief, maybe a sergeant, maybe a patrol officer, to coordinate that stuff. Where the fire truck's going to stage, because we'll bring an ambulance to have it on standby, just in case. So they will coordinate all the support mission and the actual tactical operation, where the team guys are going to go, how we're going to negotiate, if we're going to deploy gas. Those are my decisions, and those are decisions they don't want to make anyway, because they're not trained in them. If that answers your question. Skip?
Not a question, but just an observation. I did not know that the genesis of these special operation teams started in San Francisco, and you mentioned the Symbionese Army and the Weather Underground. I know with no small amount of irony that two of President Obama's best friends, Bill Ayers and Bernadette Dornan, were the founders of the Weather Underground. I won't
I'm a
ask
Republican,
for,
Skip. I'll leave it at that.
I was not going to ask for a comment.
Can I ask one?
Sure.
I was just wondering if you had an idea of, you know, when you go out on a call like that, what's the cost for that? Would you have the...
Oh, it depends. It depends on, now the part of the memorandum of agreement, because I know you live in Alton, correct?
Yeah.
The MOU that I have with
Which area
Chief
is
Heath,
Alton?
who was on the team for a while, was if we activate his people, the town of Alton pays for overtime. Everybody has to obviously cover their own people for insurance. RSA, if you read RSA 106, there's a specific provision in there that protects the towns and indemnifies the towns on these multi-jurisdictional teams. If they're activated for an emergency, RSA 106 immediately kicks in and indemnifies the towns. So, for example, an Alton police officer who's over here functioning in Laconia as a member of the team is indemnified by RSA 106 as if he was in the town of Alton, okay? So they're required to insure their own people, pay their own people. The only people that the county pays are my guys. And unfortunately, I don't get paid when I go out. I get the same thing every day, but that's fine. It goes with the territory. But Jim, by contract, is entitled to overtime. if he gets called out. Now, obviously, if they're there for 12 hours, they're going to get 12 hours pay.
So anytime they're called out for this, it's overtime, automatic?
Well, it
Or if it's
depends on the
happening
town.
during their regular shift, is that correct?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
They'd only get overtime if they're otherwise entitled to overtime for a call-out or a recall or extended duty.
Thank you.
So, and that depends on the agency.
Just want to remind you that Canton did donate a lot of maintenance.
Oh, yes, yeah, thank you. The armored rescue vehicle, which was purchased from Wenco, was actually a demo model. It had, I think it had like 8,000 miles on it. Those vehicles normally go for about $250,000. Because it was a demo, Lenco sold it to the county for $185,000, and they gave us the full warranty on it. After 6 or 7 years, the paint was starting to get pretty faded, and we had some spots that were starting to blister. Jim was able to negotiate with Canton Chevy's body shop. They actually sandblasted, well, we had to pay for the sandblasting, which was a couple $100. We had it sandblasted, and Canton's put a military spec low reflective paint, very, very rubbery stuff.
Is that the Carc paint?
I'm not sure what it is. Is that what it is, Jim?
Actually,
It's some pretty high-end
no,
stuff.
no.
3M
Right.
stuff. Same stuff they put on military vehicles.
Yeah,
It's a flat black.
chemicals and
Yes,
gas.
and they actually donated that to the county for the vehicle, which will keep it, new for a long time. We try to maintain, well, we do maintain the vehicles very well, oil changes and maintenance, because we want them to last. It's a lot of money. So we take very good care of them and make sure that they're going to last a long, long time.
Did Canton Chevrolet get recognition for that?
They did. Yeah, Jim got his picture in the paper.
Oh, good.
We had a nice plaque made with a photograph, and it's up there in the body shop. I was in the body shop today, as a matter of fact. And those guys have that plaque up there in the office if you go into Canton's body shop. We were very grateful for them because that was an expensive deal. And guys came in on their own time, and they had a blast order. They were thrilled to do it. They thought it was cool because they'd never been able to do a vehicle like that. They all wanted to take it out in the parking lot, turn the blue lights on, and see if we'd give them a rifle and let them shoot off the turret. But we said, no, not in this neighborhood. So, any other questions?
Thank you.
Again, you folks know where I am, and if any of you want to ever see this equipment, come on up. I'm more than happy to show you what it is and bring it out and let you climb in it.
Or you can just say that you're holding somebody hostage, and they'll show up anyway.
And if you see that in your driveway, you have a problem.
Sheriff, thank you very much. That was very interesting, very interesting. I wasn't aware of all of that. How many miles do you put on those vehicles a year?
Not that many.
That's good. That's a good sign.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
Yeah, how's your gas mileage?
Terrible.
I'll bet.